Very good afternoon to everybody. I hope you all are doing well and continue to stay safe. Welcome to our next edition of our UB Research Essentials series. Today's session, we're going to focus on successful grant application, getting the fundamentals right. I'm aware some of you are having problem with the power. I just got my power got cut as well, so I'm running on my data currently. So I hope we will get a full turnout. We have many registered, more than 50 over registered, but with the power cut, I'm not sure how many will actually show up to this session. Nonetheless, the session is being recorded. So just take note that all your microphone have been muted. So at the end of the presentation, you can raise your question by using the raise hand option, or you can continuously put in your question in the chat box, and we will come to the chat box later. All right, so let me just go straight into our session today. So today's session is very much focused on grant application. This is actually a 3 days workshop that I normally run with the Assistant Vice President of Sponsored Research and Grant, Mr. Philip Wich. We run a 3 days workshop on writing grant and also managing grant application. So today's session is very much a condensation of that session that we used to run. So it's going to be a lot of information within the 45 minutes to an hour. So don't worry, because I will provide you the slides. The recording will be provided as well. So I'm just going to glimpse through some of the points here. So don't get panicked when you see too much of information, and it may seem like information overload. But this session is recorded, and we will email all registered participants the recording, including the slides. All right, so what we're going to cover for the next 45 minutes or so is give you a quick overview of grant writing, then the step-by-step approach. So I'm using a 6-step approach here in trying to design and develop a grant, understanding your research, preparing the outline, putting these puzzles together, and then telling the story, editing, and also looking for the funders and other critical information that you may need to know. So firstly, when you look at this slide here, getting the fundamentals right is key in any successful grant application. The road to successful grant application may seem challenging. With limited fund, the possibility to be successful in securing grant may be low. Many factors are beyond your control, and grant writing can be challenging work even in the best of times for the seasoned researcher or grant writers. But thankfully, we can be better prepared by understanding the factors that contribute to low success rates and plan accordingly. Consider the bigger picture. Success rates for grants are directly related to the strength of the applicant and their persistence in any hurdles that comes in their way. So you got to be persistent. You got to be persistent, just like your publication. You got to be persistent in putting in your article, getting reviewed, getting rejected, and then resubmitting it, improving it as you go. So it's the same process over here. So what is grant writing? Okay, so basically when you talk about grant writing, you're talking about trying to secure some financial assistance, okay, and non-repayable funds that is normally given out by government department, corporations, and a lot of foundation. So grant writers, when you use professional grant writers, their job is basically to connect all these experts together in order for them to submit their application. So if you're in a university environment, you will actually pull a team, a group of us on who has different strength to actually write this particular grant. So there is no such thing as a perfect grant application. Okay, a lot of people always ask me, can you give me a template? But all grant application will differ from one another. So there is no standard recipe. Okay, but what we can do is basically look at some of the tips to avoid pitfalls. So in the session today, I'm going to use the term project a lot. Okay, when I say project, what it basically means is it can be research project, it can be consultancy project, but any project that require external funding. So that is what I'm talking about here today. So why do we need grant in the first place? Obviously, because you do not have internal grants. If you do not have internal grants, then you need to secure external grants, or you need to look for sponsored research. So you need some assistance to support your existing projects or your existing program and activities and initiative that you are running in your establishment. So what are the fundable grant ideas? So in any project that you do, projects that are interesting, that can benefit the people, that may sound crazy but a great idea, and you have the best experience in working on the project, you're the best person to work on the project, and you have the resources and time in carrying out this project. So those are the basic fundable grant idea where people will look for when they are trying to identify you or to even consider you for a particular grant. So when you start preparing a grant, what is key is don't be too ambitious. Okay, you got to be careful the amount of money you are given and the resources that you have to your disposal. So a project is given to you based on a certain objective or aim of the funder. So do some background search, find out about the grant, find out about the topic area that you're going to work. Is there some other project that has been done on the similar areas? Do your background information search over here. Time and effort distribution for a typical grant. So when you're working on a grant, you spend a lot of time in certain processes. Okay, you got to be very careful in the way how you plan your time. So the biggest complaint that everyone faces is they can't meet the deadline, which is key. In many competitive grant, you miss the deadline, no matter how good is your grant proposal, you are going to be rejected. So 35% of your time basically spent on the technical narrative. So normally, if you're working on a project, you should have this technical narrative written somewhere way before even the call of grant appears. So you are able to pull out this technical narrative and structure it according to the requirement of the grant. If you're going to start from a clean slate when a grant proposal comes out, that is going to take a lot of your time because 35% of your time is spent there. 25% of time is just looking for the calls because you have an idea and you have written bits and pieces everywhere and you want to meet the requirement of the funder as well. And then planning the whole proposal. And then you have, of course, the other administrative part and the submission process based on your internal requirement. What is the internal approval process? You got to follow that as well. So all that will determine how much time and effort that you need to put for every single step. So if you look at the grant, typical grant writing cycle, okay? If you look at the screen here, the chart here, write grant, get money, do research, publish the result, and repeat the process. That seems to be how it should be working. But in real sense, that is not exactly what you see happening. You do research, you get results, but you don't publish them yet. You call them preliminary result. Then you write grant to do what you already did. You get some money. Now you publish the result and use that fund to pay for another related project. And then you go through the cycle again and again. So that sometimes is exactly what happened, although it's put here as a comic here, but in real scenario, you will see that happening a lot in grant project. Vicious or virtuous cycle here. When you talk about grant project, you always talk about this cycle. Firstly, vicious cycle. Why is it vicious? Especially if you are new to grant writing. To advance your research, okay, you need to do a lot of work. You need to do a lot of experiment, undertake a lot of field work. You need to have the right team and networking as you participate in conferences. And all this needs money. Without money, you can't work on it. But you don't have such fun if you're still young researcher, if you're an academic, you're young in your academic career, you're still at the early stage of your academic career, you may have a problem with that. So most granting agency wants to see your experience. They will ask you to submit your CV. They want to see, can I trust to give you $50,000 to carry out this study based on your experience. But if you don't have the funding yet to execute all these research activities, it becomes a problem. So this is a vicious cycle that young researchers fail because they do not have the experience, and as a result, they can't get the fund. Without the fund, they cannot get the experience as well. So it is a cycle that you have to try to break. And then, of course, you have the positive part of it, the virtuous cycle here, where the more successful your proposal, the more requests you will get, okay? You will know the tricks, the techniques, and how to carry out a good research. What works, what do not work, you will know at the end of the study. So getting your projects funded and executing them will make you a better writer as you go, just like publication. You will improve as you go, but that doesn't guarantee that you will always get funded, okay? So all depend on how you work through and how you learn from your process. So you have to go through various cycles when you do projects. So if you look at in a typical research projects, okay, you will always have at least 3 phases. At the early stage, the middle stage, and the post stage once the project is completed. So I'm not going to go through the details, so you can read it through. It's quite straightforward. The early stage in just preparing the proposal and getting the project. And the second stage will be when the project is awarded, the actual work will start. Okay, the actual work will start and your clock will start ticking, and you have a contract that has been signed and you have to deliver. And then once the project is completed, how do you do a closure? It's as important. A lot of people forget to do a proper closure. Without doing a proper closure, you are putting yourself and your institution at risk. Okay, you can get a legal suit coming after you, or you may be blacklisted for future project. So you got to understand the whole life cycle of the project, including all the ethics involved in carrying out any form of research project. So let's look now at the 6 steps that is involved in getting yourself prepared to submit a grant application. I'm going to go through the snapshot because if I want to go through the detail of each one, it's as I've said, it's actually a 3 days workshop that I run just to go through the 6. But today I'm just going to do it in a glance. Step number 1, do your research. Do your background search about what you're trying to propose here. You can start, of course, from Google. What are the best topics out there? Topics you know well, topics that you love, topics that you know the funder or the audience and the beneficiary is going to love, and it's going to assist them. So the problem, so what are you trying to problem here? So you got to make sure that a funded project is not so broad. Okay, so this is key. You got to use the funnel approach. Okay, start from the broad topic. For instance, if you see on the screen here, sustainability, then you go all the way down, small island sustainability, renewable energy in small island sustainability, and then you focus finally on financial viability of the renewable energy small island sustainability. So you actually zoom it down. So don't be too broad. You can also focus your study based on a certain question that you put the broad topic to general question and then to specific question that you're trying to address. So what is key in your step 1 is, first of all, read the entire application. If a call is given to you, read. This is where most people rush without reading what the funder is looking for. You may have the best idea in the world, but it doesn't fit to the philosophy of the funder or what they're looking for. So read the entire application, what to include, what not to include. Okay, understand the entire process, timeline given to you, deadlines given to you, the reporting, everything you got to understand. Look for clues, what they are actually want. Look for past projects if it is listed in the website. Ensure you understand when is the deadline. This is key because there is no such thing as extension given unless, of course, there is a big call for extension due to unavoided reason. But in most cases, most grants do not allow any extension because it's very competitive. And then also do not forget the deadline is not just for the external funder that is set. You also have an internal deadline. If you're an institution, every institution will have their internal review process. You got to follow the internal deadline as well. Okay. And then of course, make sure you find the correct match. Okay. Not all the projects can be funded based on the idea that you have. So you got to find the correct project. Step number 2, which is the most important part, writing the outline. Okay. Drafting a comprehensive outline. So when you first get a project, quickly do an outline first. What are the things that you want to include? Okay. Write an outline, use some main headings and subheadings, and then start with it. That's how I start all my grant project. I will put all the headings first. Okay. Then start filling up one by one. In some grants, they've already given you the question that you need to answer. In some grants, they do not. Then you got to put in accordingly. So in most grants, these are the 9 things that you should have typically. Okay, the 9 questions that I listed here: project summary, background to the present application, the purpose of the project, the timeline of the project, the primary audience that is going to benefit from this project, the beneficiary, how are you going to measure the success, how are you going to disseminate the findings at the later stage, and how do you design the budget to fulfill the objective, and what are the other supplementary materials that you need to include. So let's look at the first one, project summary. So this is important. When you start any grant proposal, you need to have a summary. It's just like an executive summary, but this is a project summary for grants, which have to be very precise, because if the project summary do not tie with the objective or the aim of the funder, your funder or the reviewer who's looking at the proposal will not read through anymore. Because the moment the summary is not precisely written according to the goals of the project, then it is not suitable at all for this submission. So be specific, okay? Be specific in terms of the objective, the method. You've got to be very clear. If you look at an example that I put on the screen here, an example of a good project summary. This is from the Salvation Army project. The Salvation Army requests $5,000 for a 2-year, $50,000 job training program for homeless women impacted by Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas. Training will be offered at 4 rural shelters and will include basic clerical skills, interview techniques, and job seeker support groups. The project will build the fundamental capacity for the women to be equipped with the necessary skills for employment. So in this short para, you will get everything that you need to know whether this guy deserves the fund or not. What was the project? Why is this important? How is this going to be done? And who is going to benefit the outcome out of it? So this is what I mean by a good, precise project summary. Next, background. Okay, about you, the organization's information. If it's part of a submission that is done representing the university, the historical information about the university, the mission, the budget, the background of the university becomes very key. Okay, if you're doing it individually, then of course your background becomes very key here. The background here also means on the project itself. Why is this project important for this particular community that you're bidding for? So ensure that it is not too micro and it is not too macro. It got to be correctly designed. Is there statistics to support? Is there latest data that you can put in? Is there census data that you can support here? Is there any stories that you want to add that is coming from the community? Why a particular community is going to benefit from this project? So you got to put in all this information when you are designing the background of the project. Question 3 now, the third part, describing the purpose of the project. This is where you convince the funder that the issue you want to tackle is important and show that your organization is an expert on the issue. Describe the major components and the situation description here. The situation description here is basically to talk about the ground. Why is this important? Looking at the situation that you are in and in the project that you are trying to convince here. So the way how you write becomes very critical here. Remember, there is a limitation in the way you write your grant. It is not writing a thesis where you're able to write few hundred pages. You have to be very precise, because most funders got a lot of proposal to read. So they don't want to be wasting time reading 100, 200 pages proposal. It has to be very precise. So what you write is very key. Don't assume the funders know about your subject area. So the way you write becomes critical as well. You got to be describing it correctly, and don't make assumption that the funder actually knows what you're talking about. Be very precise, but clear. Why is the situation important to be funded in this project? Describe the situation, okay, in both factual and human interest term. Why is this study going to be good? Consider doing this study for what purpose? Why is this going to help the particular beneficiary? So another thing that I put here is, don't describe the problem as the absence of your project. This is another key thing as well. For instance, if you look at, I give you an example. We don't have, let's say, if I say, if we don't have enough beds in our battered women's shelter, is not the problem for the project. The problem is increased level of domestic violence. That is a problem. So more shelter beds here is the solution here for this particular statement here. So how you write the problem becomes very key in the project. The next one is the milestone and the design, the work plan. So this becomes very key in any project. How are you going to take through the project from first stage until all the way? So this is where your funder will start measuring the outcome of your work and pay you accordingly. There will be 4 or 5 milestones. You're required to submit an inception report. You're required to submit reports at different stage, a technical report. You may have an interim report, and then you may have a final report, depending on the project. You may have 3 to 5 report that you got to submit accordingly, and you're given payment based on what you put in. So how you design the project becomes critical, okay? What are you going to do for all the tasks that is required? So you got to follow your terms of reference. What is given your terms of reference, make sure it is all reflected in your activities. What project planning has already taken place? Maybe you have done certain work way before the project. You already have this information. Who is going to do the work? When will the project take place? Where will it take place? So all this information becomes critical. So it's important to come out with a good logical framework of your study. Okay, present the details in this framework that can be well understood. Sometimes you have a lot of information, and when you write in long paragraph, people get lost. So the easiest way is actually put it in a chart. There is no standard format. You can use any chart that you want. There's a lot of applications that can help you as well. So basically, to tell people what are you going to do, how the project planning is working, and who is going to do the work, and at where are they going to come in. So all this can be reflected in a good chart, in a good flow. So this will help the funder to actually understand what you're trying to do. As part of the design, as I've said, what is important is also the timelines and the milestone. Set suitable timeline and milestone. Okay, as I've said at the beginning, don't be too ambitious. Okay, try to be realistic. If the project is 12 months, what can you deliver in 12 months? What are the buffer you need? Projects can go wrong. You may have crisis. You may have pandemics. You can have a lot of things that's happening which you did not put into consideration when you actually prepared this grant. So when will the project take place becomes critical, and where will this take place become important as well in this milestone here. Primary audience. Who are the target audience, and how will you involve them in the activity? How many people do you intend to serve? So you're talking about direct participants, okay, people who are directly impacted, and you're also talking about indirect beneficiaries, okay. So who are those indirectly going to be receiving the benefit from this project? When I talk about direct participant, is like, for instance, the musician in the community band, the kids doing summer cleanup in the park. These are all direct. When I say indirect, the music lovers, the people who use the park, these are indirect. They're not part of the project, but indirectly they're going to benefit. So it's good for you to put those who are going to be a direct beneficiary and the indirect beneficiary here. Measure of success. This is important. This is where the funder is going to measure how successful is the project that you have set, the monitoring and the evaluation. So what is your measurement to say that this project was successful? If you have 4 objectives, make sure the 4 objectives can be measured, okay? Can be measured. It should be realistic. You don't just prepare simply put an evaluation, because this is where the funders will actually be looking very closely to see, is this project worth funding? What are the outcomes? What are the impacts? Okay, what is the key for a funder? What is key for a funder is the project can be measured and they are able to justify the money that is given to you. So normally here is where you put in, based on the objective, what are the questions that you're looking for, and what are the indicators to measure the question, and what are the data you need to collect to support the indicator. So these are the things that you have to structure in details for the funder. And then question 7 will look at dissemination and communication plan. Doing a project is not enough, is not sufficient, because if the beneficiary is not getting access to the information or getting access to the work that you have done, then it's useless. It looks good in project proposals, it looks good in paper. This is where a lot of projects have failed. It looks nice, beautiful blueprint, consultants have come up with a very good work, but it is not implemented at the ground level. So the communication and advocacy plan becomes critical as well in a lot of research and also consultancy work. You need to tell the community about this program and the outcome and how they can use the findings for this project to benefit. And then budget. This becomes another important part of any submission for any project. How much will the project going to cost? So there's a lot of things that the budget itself can be a 1-day workshop just to run through every single item in terms of how do you structure the expenses, okay, the personal expenses, the direct project expenses, the administrative or overhead expenses, the income. Some projects have income, some projects, most projects there is no income, but in some projects, because of the project, you are able to run some workshop, you are able to publish something, and you make an earning from that. Contributed income that comes in kind, okay, or someone give you in cash, or someone give you in terms of kind, in terms of using certain facilities or access to certain expert or man hours. So that can be in kind. So budget becomes critical, because if the budget do not fulfill the requirement of the funder, you will not get the project. If the project say 100,000, they expect the amount not to exceed 100,000. Even if you say, oh, it's exceeded by 5,000, you will be knocked out technically. So fulfill the requirement. That is key for you. If you think you cannot do the work in 100,000, then do not bid for the project. Simple as that. So you got to make sure once you have prepared the detailed budget, be sure to add up correctly. So this is another common mistake that you see in a lot of the projects. Incorrect addition of budget. So this is quite common, and you got to make sure every single figures that you put in is actually computed. I'm not going to go through the details here because it's quite a lengthy discussion if I'm going to go through one by one on the detailed expenses. At UB, for those of you from UB, you're quite familiar with this UB's internal grant, where we have actually given you a form. So you don't even need to worry what are the areas that you need to focus on. So it depends. In some grants, you're given a breakdown, what are the things that you can budget for. And in some project, they just leave it to you. It's up to you how you want to structure it. If you're given a structure, follow the structure. And sometimes they will give you a ceiling, how much maximum you're allowed for each category, or sometimes you call it a vote. Okay, so how much are you allowed to spend on the stipend? How much are you allowed for the rental? So they will give you a percentage of the total amount that you're going to be funded. And then lastly, additional information that you need to add on. What are the supplementary materials that you need? So this depends on the project and depends on where you are, whether you need to include a tax exam letter, depending whether you need to include the list of your board of directors, and or if you have partnership between different universities working on a project, you may need to put in the partnership agreement. A lot of the projects, especially big consultancy project, require audited financial statements. What is the latest audited financial statement? They basically want to see whether is this project worth funding? Is the institution stable enough? Do they have a good system and processes in place? Okay, how are you managing your resume? And then of course the CV, the key CVs of people, personal involved, and also some information about your organization. All this can actually be part of your annexes. So your annexes and attachment can be large, doesn't matter. But what is key is the main document should not be too much. So all these are all part of your step number 2 that I started off. So step number 3, then once you have got all this document put together, now you have to put the puzzle together. So this is where you prepare, make sure you have a cover letter, make sure sometimes they want your technical proposal and your financial proposal to be separated. You are evaluated separately. The technical part is separately and the financial part is separately. Sometimes they will ask you to put it together. And then also include all the other supplementary materials. More and more grant funders require you to submit an online submission. So they will actually give you a form. So you fill up the form online. So that is making your life easy to prepare the proposal. But if they have not, then you have to do the traditional way of writing the whole proposal. So make sure you have sufficient information, the number of copies that is required, what are the cover sheet that needs to be added on, which are the attachment that needs a letterhead for approval. Okay, some of it they will say that you have to submit the documentation based on your company's letterhead. So make sure you submit as the information as that is as per the requirement of the project. Number 4, ensure you are telling a story. Okay, provide detailed picture. At the same time, be realistic and try to tell a story. Okay, you want to tell a good story why this project needs to be funded. Okay, so it has to be an excellent way of writing. Okay, it is a technical proposal, but you can still tell a good story why this project needs to be funded. So this is where you may need help for whoever is good in writing to help you to restructure the original proposal to make sure that it is well written. That it's a great way of telling why this project needs to be funded. Next, edit. So this is important as well. Review, get another person to review, get someone who have not read this proposal before to look at it. It is always important to check again and again for grammar, for spelling, for punctuation. Sometimes you would have seen this application so many times that you will overlook the mistake until someone else points out to you to say, oh, you missed this out. Okay, so when you write, remember you are writing for the reviewers of this grant, not writing for yourself. So you got to make sure that it's readable enough and it is written in a way that the reader can understand. So avoid using a lot of this acronym and jargon that no one understands. So make sure it is very clearly written, well edited, proofreading. Okay, so this becomes very important. In a lot of online application, they've also set limit in the word and characters. So if they say the introduction cannot exceed 1,000 words, they mean 1,000 word, not 1,001. The moment the 1,001 character goes in, it rejects. So you got to follow the requirement accordingly. Look at the formatting. Make sure if you are submitting an application using Microsoft Word and you're designing the submission, make sure it is well formatted consistently. Make sure you put the letterhead where is required, letterhead. Step number 6, getting to know the funder. So at the end of the day, this helps as well. Okay, so normally if you have submitted a particular fund for within an organization or foundation, and then you have tried, you fail the first time, the second time you go in, people will start getting to know you, they will start getting to notice you. So it is good to understand who is in the board, who is involved in this organization that is going to be funding you. Get to know them, get to understand what is their philosophy behind. So this becomes important in a way to make you to understand exactly what they're looking for, and that relationship building will actually help sometimes in order for you to get a fund. So even if you get a fund rejected, don't be harsh or don't be upset about it. Write a thank you letter that even though you did not get the fund. So it is still important to acknowledge that okay, thank you for your review, and I will rectify this, and hopefully you can consider this for the following year, something like that. So but make sure that you don't give up. Persistent becomes important. Other critical information before I wrap up. There are also different variation in proposal. What I showed you earlier is a typical proposal and consultancy proposal that you will see. But there may be other kind of proposals where you need some fund. You're asking for money not because of a particular project, okay, but it is to support many activities that you're doing in your organization. So the way you write the structure may be slightly different. You may structure it something like that. You have a general organizational information, the situational description of why this organization needs to fund you, understand your organization well, the needs of your organization, then what are the work plan or specific activities that is required for this particular project, how is it going to impact, is there anyone else funding? Okay, you may say, I just need 5,000 from you because I'm getting another 5,000 from somewhere else. So who else is supporting? How are you going to sustain yourself the future? If I give you 5,000 to run this project, how is it going to be sustained? Is there some other fund coming? How are you going to evaluate your work? And then of course, the budget. And then there are also some proposals that are written for the purpose of capital endowment. Okay, so this include information for any huge big projects. Normally, in most capital endowment project, this is to fund building projects in most cases. So explain how this building project or the creation of or expansion of your endowment will help you do a better job for serving your community. So you got to give the big picture here. What is the long-term plans, okay, for financial health, especially if you want for the building. So it's not just for the building, but how are you going to maintain it later? So how are you going to sustain that sale? So you have to build that information into your proposal. So I'm not going to go through the details here. As I've said, I'm just skimming through today. Facing a project becomes important as well. In most projects, you may be given a fund for a particular phase only. That's it. And then you may say, okay, I need $50,000, but then you know the grant can only give you $10,000. So what you need to do is face it. So this $10,000 is going to be used for a certain phase of the project only. And then you're going to, based on the outcome, you're going to go back to the funder to say, okay, this has been my outcome. The outcome has been good. So I'm hoping to go to my phase 2. You may get it or you may not, or you may take the phase 2 elsewhere. But what is important is you map it out clearly. Is an amount sufficient for you? If you say, I need $100,000 to complete this whole project, but then you know the funder can only give you the most 20,000. So how are you going to deliver? You can't say, okay, I have watered down the $100,000 project up to the level of 20,000. So that will impact the actual outcome. So instead, you can face it, have a few phase, and then it's okay. I just need for this phase. It's the same in UB. We have the internal grant. The max is only 3,000. So you can't do much with 3,000. But if you're smart enough, you can face your project. Okay, I'm going to take the first 3,000. I'm going to deliver the outcome. Okay, I'm going to resubmit for another project for another 3,000. Then you work along that way. So that is how you face your project. Collaboration becomes important as well. Okay, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, how do you jointly collaborate? Not just within your organization, it can also be collaborators that is coming externally, internationally, from the industry, from the government, civil service. Anyone can actually jointly work together across different disciplines. So more and more projects require an interdisciplinary approach or transdisciplinary approach in order to solve a particular problem. You cannot work in silos anymore, discipline by discipline. Many projects require you to work together. So remember, the main reason why applications are rejected, okay, your goals are not the same as the funder's goal. So this is one of the reasons why most projects gets thrown out in the first place. What is the philosophy behind the funder, and is it aligned? Second, your organization either is not ready or does not appear to be ready, meaning to say your system and processes is in a bad shape. You do not have an annual audits done. So the funder can actually look at from your application, they can actually say that, okay, this organization is not ready. They just want the fund, but they're not ready for it. Do you have the team? Do you have the resources to support you? Program objectives which are not measurable. Okay, nice objective, nice proposal, but then you find a problem to measure it. How do I measure? Is it realistic enough? It looks great, but I can't measure the outcome. This is going to be difficult. And then, of course, the budget, inconsistency in the budget, a poorly designed budget, the percentage of certain areas are too high. Okay, the personal cost, the stipend given is too high, and then the overheads. Um, how much are you spending? The actual field work. So you got to look at the budget properly. Not following the guidelines. So this is important. This is what we call a desktop rejection. There are certain guidelines the funder would have given in the website. Read. That is the first document you got to read. Submission guideline. So if you do not follow that, first round rejection from the 100 application, you will find 50 of them get rejected because why? They've already prepared this proposal way in advance. They have no time or have not read the guideline. They've just submitted blindly. Say, oh, this idea seems to tie with this idea. I'm just going to submit without following the guideline. So it's important for you to always read the guideline. All right, so that concludes the presentation today. So remember, seeking grant money is not straightforward. It's not easy. It is time consuming. Okay, it can be frustrating because you will not always be successful. But what is important, as I've said, is persistent. You got to be persistent when you submit. You learn from mistakes, and then you submit and you resubmit. No one is perfect. You can be the top researcher in the world, and you can still get your project proposal submitted, rejected. Okay. So you may find that you can get project money, but not the operating money sometimes. You get certain portion of the fund to do certain basic activity, but then you may also have a problem to do certain part of the activity. This is where the matching grants becomes important, where you have some fund coming from another institution to help you to cover certain aspect of it. So you got to be very clear whether this fund is enough for you to run the project. Funders' generosity. Okay, you may be surprised by the funders' generosity, but you may also be surprised by their periodic changes in focus. Okay, so they can be very generous in giving the fund. At the same time, they can shift their goals quickly. So not during the period of the project, but the philosophy behind the funder may change. So you got to always make sure that you are ready and you know what you are applying for and you read through. Most funders have board and staff people who are thoughtful, careful, curious, well educated about community issues and willing to help you. Okay, so they're not trying to be difficult. You need to understand, they're not there to kill you. No, they want to make sure that the fund that is given to you is well spent. That's all that they want to do. They want to help you to give you, but you got to help them by doing your job. Okay, so is there a real need for the project in the first place? So that becomes important. So if there is a need, you will get the project given to you. So there's a lot of references that I've put here for those of you who are very interested to get more information. There's a long list of references here. There's also a lot of resources that we have at our UB library. So take your time to look out for all these resources that can actually help you. If you need any further help, don't hesitate to contact the research contact at research@ub.edu.bs. You can directly write to us. All right, so that is giving you a quick 45-minute snapshot, which is normally a 3 days workshop to run through every single thing that I presented today. So this is giving you a quick idea of preparing. Remember, in most research grant application, you have to follow the requirement of the grant. because every grant is different. Okay, whether it's your science based or social science based or arts and humanities or medical based, it's different. You got to see what is the requirement, what are the things that you can spend on, and how do you spend the budget, how do you put the budget on, what kind of timeline they do. It's all going to be slightly different, but the fundamentals is still the same as what I've shown you here. All right, so let me now look at some of the question. I will open the floor. If Miss Virginia Ballance wants to add on to whatever I've said, you can add on as well, Miss Ballance. Okay, Miss Ballance have put something there. Often government grant funders require that the proposal includes an outline of how the research data will be managed as well as preserved or archived for the long term. They call it the data management plan, which will be covered next week, but not only for grants. Yes, how are you going to ensure this data will be managed? Okay, this is similar to what I put there in terms of getting the outcome of the findings out there. In some funder, in some foundation, for instance, recently, the Templeton World Foundation, they've come up with a new requirement where all project that has been funded must be published in an open access journal. So that is a new requirement that they have set. So open access, why open access? More people is able to read. If you go in, if you publish this in some subscribed journal, the probability is not many people can get access to it. So that becomes a problem. Miss Virginia, you let me unmute. Okay. Okay, I have unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Vic. Yes, very often these days grants will require you to even go further than just say how you're going to manage the data, but how it's going to be stored and described and made accessible to others, because very often the data you collect in your project can be used by other people. And that's part and parcel of the, not just publishing the results in an open access journal, but actually making the whole data available for others to build on.
Yes, indeed. So it becomes important as well, because if we see in some consultancy projects, the data that you collect becomes the ownership of the data. All the work that you have done goes to the funder. So meaning you can't use this material for any publication unless it's a research project. Normally you can, but if it's a consultancy project, most cases they don't allow you, and or if you want to use it, you have to get special permission. But what is key here is how do you manage this data in the future? Because we see in many journals now, they even have data sheet. You are able to actually publish even the data, so people can make use of this data to help them to solve some other problems, some other similar problems. So there's a lot of different types of publications and data management that is coming out there now. So grant is, of course, is one of it. The main role of the grant is just to get the fund, but how to use the fund and what you do at the end of the day becomes critical. So our aim of getting a grant is not just to write a beautiful final report. Of course, you need to submit a final report, but it's not just in the form of a report, but the outcome. What happens with this data later? How do you make sure the community is going to get out of it? The industry is going to get out of it? Can the government use this in the first place? Or they've spent $100,000 and then you just get a beautiful report that is sitting in someone's office. So you don't want that. So in a project, a funded project, especially if it is a huge project, like it's cutting across different communities, then it becomes very, very important how you use or make use of the fund. Any questions from the audience? You can raise your hand, I can unmute you, or you can actually put your question in the chat. As I've said, I will send these slides to all those who have registered. I have your information, so we will send it to you, including the recording of the session today. any question? Anyone is having any problem? Anyone have submitted their application and they are facing a certain particular challenge that I may not have discussed here? Please feel free to ask. Nope, everyone seems to be clear. Nicolette, okay, let me. Yes.
Many thanks. Thank you. So I guess my question has to do with the internal. So I'm working on a very large grant,
Okay.
and may not, and in conjunction with others. But what I've found is that it's taking a really long time to get all of the approvals within the institution, and it's really slowing things down. And it's
Okay.
slowing down the ability of us to actually engage in the research. And I just wondered, what advice do you have for us on navigating all the different protocols within the university? Thank heaven I'm working with Mr. Weish, who is taking on all of those challenges
Yeah.
for me, but it's still really, really
Yeah,
slow.
I think that was the main reason we set up this Office of Sponsored Research and Grants, and all sponsored research and project goes through his office so that he can guide you accordingly to the departments that needs to be involved. Because if you see, one of the most important documents that you need to get before any proposal goes out is the letter coming from the president to sign off as a support. So normally the president will not sign until the project submission is complete. This is where the role of Mr. Weish to check to make sure everything is in order. So I'm not sure about the project you are talking about. Does it whether this project is involving uh, various faculty, or is it within your faculty, and because there's no reason why it should, if your submission is complete, if all your records that you have submitted is required for the proposal, the requirement of the proposal is complete, then it shouldn't there is no reason at all why there should be a delay in you to actually submit, to get approval for this submission.
So yeah, I put it in the chat, but I just wanted to say that it's because it's such a big project, it required auditing, and it required the general counsel, and it required all these things, and it's just been a long process.
I think that one of the biggest challenge that we will face at UB is actually getting the audited accounts, because in some projects they want the latest audited account, which we don't have. So in some projects, as long as you can give a few years audited account, they're okay about it. So once they're okay about it, then it's fine. And then the general counsel will come into play if there is a legal requirement. So normally once you put a proposal in, they look at the terms of reference, then they look at your proposal, and then they see, is there any legal issues or not? So that's why when I presented just now, I mentioned to you, you got to look at two deadlines. What is the actual deadline and what is the internal deadline? So when you have an idea of a proposal, the first thing you got to do is talk to the Office of Sponsored Research through Mr. Weish, and he will tell you, okay, he needs how many weeks to do this part of the proposal to get this approval done. So normally, I know the General Counsel will ask you almost 2 weeks. They say, give me 2 weeks before the submission. Don't give me 1 or 2 days, and for her to run through the legal part of it. So normally they will require at least 2 weeks, 2 weeks before the deadline. So once the General Counsel said okay, then getting the letter from the president will not be an issue at all. But then we're thankful that Mr. Weish is always there to push through whatever is required. He will find where is the challenge in your proposal, and what are the things that you need to put it in place, what can work, what cannot work. So he's always there to help. So do contact his office. Miss Ballance have put in something there as well for you to get more information. Let me unmute Tanya. You have a question?
Yes, good afternoon, colleagues. I submitted in the original grant workshop. I submitted a draft of a proposal basically.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't have to go into great details with it, but basically it was for us to try as a department to get a lab devoted, a math lab, computer lab devoted, where we could have students come in and do quizzes, online quizzes, and so on, and have it be monitored.
Yep.
Now, we started to do, because I took their suggestions, and we started to do a bit of research so that we could have the background and the justification. And I'm wondering now, with this pandemic, what changes I have to make. Should I still be trying to pursue it, given that I would think it's somewhat taken care of itself? Everyone should realize the need now to have more computers accessible to students. So is this almost a redundant proposal? Should I'm at a standstill right now, because I'm given our pandemic, we know that we cannot have the students come in to do what we're proposing. But should I still pursue trying to get a lab nonetheless in the event, that all is well moving forward? Your advice, please.
Well, I think basically the first thing is whether we can afford a lab. So that's one thing, whether UB can actually afford at the current financial state that we are in. So maybe we can't afford, unless of course the funding is actually coming externally. I'm aware that UB is working out something to get some funding externally to actually give away computers and laptops to students and faculty that is really that really require them. But in terms of the lab, looking at the current state, the lab is not going to help you. Okay, it's not going to help you because I'm not sure how long is this crisis that we are in going to be. It's going to be at least until I foresee until fall 2021, we're going to be more or less in the same state as we are in now. So any labs that you're talking can only take place maybe even after 2022, when there's back to physical contact with students. So until then, I don't see this project going through, unless of course the fund is actually going to be used to actually give deserving students and faculty that really needs the laptop to actually engage with the learning. Okay. Any other question? All right. If there's no other question, as I've said, do not hesitate to contact us. As I mentioned at the faculty, general faculty presentation last week, I think, I talked about the internal grant. Okay, because of the financial state now, we have frozen the internal grant for the moment. So hopefully you will get that running soon. In the meanwhile, we are all out trying to get external grants. So please do work with Mr. Wich's office and look out from UB Research emails. We frequently send out calls for proposal, calls for projects. Try to look at the projects and you see whether this is something that you can work with. You may want to form a team internally or externally and work through it and get through my office or even to Mr. Wich's office and see how we can help you to get these projects. But what is key is try not to come to us at the very last minute. If your deadline is this week, this Friday, then don't come and see us on Monday. It's going to be a bit too late because there's a lot of internal process involved, in order for us to give the clearance to say the legal part is okay, the proposal is well designed. So we will run through, we will help you to make it better. We're not going to reject. We're going to say, okay, what is wrong, how to make it better before an external reviewer picks it up and rejects your application. So please give us ample time so that we can help you. But doesn't mean that you will guarantee to get, but at least you have fulfilled the requirement, and now it's all dependent on the funder. There may be few hundred application, you have to be the top of the 10 of the 100. So you don't know. So if you're lucky, you get it because some project is based on your geographic location. If you're coming from here in the Caribbean, they say, okay, they're allocating 5 seats for the Caribbean, and there's not many coming from here, then you may get it. So you need to be very strategic in the way how you work. So at the end of the day, submit to the Office of Sponsored Research and Grant much earlier, so that we can really help you to secure these grants. All right then, thank you, and I will see you. Okay, you have Ms. Ballance, another question? Yes.
No, I was just playing around with the
Oh, okay.
applause button. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right then. Thank you so much. So I will see you again for our next workshop in a few weeks' time. So stay safe. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you again. Thank you then. Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody.